Imagine, for a second, you're sitting down to play a game of Monopoly with a group of people.
Okay, classic game.
Right. But for the first, say, 50 rounds of this game, you are legally barred from buying any property at all.
Wow. Okay, that's a terrible rule.
It is, right. Every time you roll the dice, you are literally just paying rent to the other players. And they're, steadily building houses, putting up hotels on every available square.
So they own everything.
Exactly. But then, on round 51, the rules suddenly change. You're finally allowed to buy property. And the other players look at you and say, okay, the rules are fair now. Let's compete as if the starting line had always been equal.
I mean, it's a completely sobering scenario.
Yeah.
And it perfectly illustrates the central premise of the document we're analyzing today. Because in that scenario, you're suddenly competing in a system where the board is already owned.
Yeah, completely bought up.
Right. And the other players have massive reserves of cash, entirely because of the rules of those first 50 rounds.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring this highly structured, frankly fascinating document that examines the mechanics of racial inequality, institutional power, and a comprehensive blueprint for systemic change.
It's a really heavy text, but so important to break down.
It really is. Specifically, we are looking at an analysis written by Jimma Maat Dogon Mcwilson of the African World Exploratory University. And this analysis updates and, expands upon a really foundational 1984 book by Theodore L. Cross, which is titled The Black Power Imperative.
And before we really dive into the weeds of this blueprint, it's definitely worth setting the parameters for our discussion today.
Yeah, a quick note on neutrality here.
Exactly. We are looking at this text as an architectural framework. Our goal today is an objective, totally impartial exploration of these arguments. We're here to unpack Mcwilson's and Cross's text, examining the mechanics of their viewpoints, right?
Yeah.
And the specific action plan they present.
Right. We're not here to endorse a political side or, advocate for a specific ideology.
No, not at all.
We just want to help you, the listener, understand the core logic and the operational mechanisms contained within this source material. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Dude.
Because to understand the 2026 action plan Mcwilson is laying out, we have to start with Theodore Cross back in 1984. And Cross's premise, it fundamentally changes how this framework views inequality, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Because Cross completely rejects the idea that racism is merely a matter of personal prejudice.
Like just one person not liking another person?
Right. If you only view inequality as, personal bias, your response is going to be incredibly limited. It's limited to moral appeals.
Just trying to change minds.
Exactly. You'd spend all your energy trying to change individual hearts. But Cross argued that this misses the much larger, much more mechanical reality. He framed racial inequality as a deeply entrenched system of, quote, accumulated advantage.
Accumulated advantage. So let's define what that actually means in the context of this text. Like, what exactly is accumulating?
Well, the blueprint is very specific here. It lists things like land, capital, jobs, schools, courts, the media, banks, housing, law, and political influence.
So pretty much the entire infrastructure of society.
Pretty much, yeah. Cross argued that the societal gaps we see, they aren't the result of personal failure or, a lack of individual effort. They are the calculated outcome of historical and institutional design. The distribution of power in American society was designed to benefit those with prior position and incumbency.
Going back to that monopoly scenario, you weren't simply denied an opportunity in a vacuum. You were legally, economically, and educationally positioned at the bottom and then expected to compete on a board literally defined by that accumulated advantage.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that Theodore Cross was not just some theorist operating in the abstract.
He had a pretty serious background, right?
He did. He actually founded and edited the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. And because of that background, his argument was intensely data-driven. He believed that progress could not just be debated. It had to be measured with hard data and then converted into actual pressure.
And the data Mcwilson includes in this modern update, it really illustrates why Cross's 1984 warning is treated with such urgency in this document today. The text pulls from census data to show that in 2024, 18.4% of Black Americans were living below the official poverty line.
Which is significant.
It's massive. That is more than double the rate for non-Hispanic white Americans.
And that economic disparity, it continues right into the workforce data as well. The analysis points out that in April of 2026, Black unemployment sat at 7.3%, compared to an overall national rate of 4.3%.
So the structural gap Cross identified in the 80s, it's clearly not a relic.
Not at all. The board is still heavily skewed by that historical accumulation.
Which brings us to really a massive pivot point in the document. If systemic advantage is this deeply rooted, if the poverty and unemployment numbers are still showing these huge gaps decades later, how does Mcwilson update Cross's 1984 perspective for the reality of 2026?
So Mcwilson introduces a major rhetorical and operational shift here. He states that the imperative must now focus on 4 specific pillars, and those are Black family, Black education, Black institution, and Black policy.
Okay, family, education, institution, policy.
Right. But I'd say the most prominent shift is how he actually redefines the entire concept of Black power.
Because that phrase, it carries a lot of historical weight. How does this specific framework define it?
So Mcwilson explicitly writes that Black power is not rooted in hatred or opposition. He defines it as organized love.
Organized love.
Yes, specifically the organized love of Black people, Black children, Black history, Black intelligence, Black labor, and the Black future. It's a definition rooted entirely in self-affirmation and internal institutional building.
And you can actually see this philosophy visually represented in the source material, which I found really interesting. The logo for Mcwilson's African World Exploratory University, or AWE, it illustrates this intersection of historical identity and forward-looking building.
Oh, the logo's great. Describe it for the listeners.
Yeah, so the letters AWE are rendered using Pan-African colors. So you have red, black, green, and yellow, and they're filled with these really intricate geometric patterns.
And right in the center of the logo is an Ankh symbol, also outlined in those same colors.
Right, the ancient Egyptian symbol of life.
Exactly. And by combining that ancient symbol with structured geometric patterns, which often represent ordered intelligence and architecture, the logo visually communicates the text's goal, which is grounding future institutional building in the deep roots of African identity.
It is a striking visual, but this is where I have to push back a little bit. And honestly, it's a skepticism you might be feeling as well while listening to this. Organized love sounds beautiful on paper. It's profound.
It is.
But how do you actually operationalize a sentiment like organized love against a rigid mathematical problem like a 7.3% unemployment rate or, systemic poverty?
Yeah, that is the ultimate test of this framework, isn't it? Without a tangible mechanism, organized love remains just a sentiment. It's just a feeling.
Right.
So Mcwilson addresses this by laying out a highly specific 5-phase action plan. And he targets the single most critical engine for generating power first, which is education.
Education.
Yeah. He argues that the current condition of Black student achievement is not a byproduct of chance. It is a direct result of how the educational system is designed and maintained.
And the text hits us with a staggering piece of data to establish the baseline here. The analysis cites 2024 NAEP results. And for those unfamiliar, NAEP stands for the National Assessment of Educational Progress.
Basically, the nation's report card.
Exactly. According to those 2024 results, only 16% of Black fourth graders reached reading proficiency. 16%.
It is a totally stark metric.
It's shocking.
But Mcwilson's analysis of that number is where the framework's philosophy really takes shape, because he flatly rejects the traditional terminology used by the educational establishment to describe this phenomenon.
Like the achievement gap.
Yes. He argues this should never be called an achievement gap.
That is really interesting because achievement gap is, that's the default phrase in almost every policy discussion on education. Why reject it?
Well, think about what the phrase implies. The phrase achievement gap places the burden of failure entirely on the child.
Oh, I see.
It implies the students simply fail to achieve the standard. Mcwilson reframes that 16% proficiency rate entirely. He labels it a power gap, a curriculum gap, an expectation gap, and an institutional responsibility gap.
So the system failed, not the child.
In this model, absolutely. The failure belongs to these institutions and the adults running them, not the fourth graders.
Which leads directly into phase 1 of his action plan, which is titled Black Knowledge and Identity. The text argues that the very first mechanism of change requires that every child know exactly who they are.
And to do that, Mcwilson proposes a comprehensive national curriculum, one that covers African origins, 1619, enslavement, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and a concept called Maat.
Let's touch on Maat for a second.
Yeah, Maat is a crucial inclusion there. It refers to the ancient Egyptian philosophical concept of truth, balance, order, harmony, and justice.
So it's not just history, it's philosophy.
Exactly. By integrating Maat into the curriculum alongside historical events, the framework aims to provide a philosophical grounding that differs from standard Western educational models. Phase 1 essentially poses 4 questions every child must be able to answer.
Right. The questions are, who am I and where do I come from? What was done to my people? What did my people build? And finally, what am I responsible to build?
I love that last one. It ties historical knowledge directly to future obligation.
It really does. And that obligation moves from theory to practice in phase 2, which focuses on best academic practice models. This phase actually proposes launching local academic power centers.
And these centers are designed to combine that cultural confidence from phase 1 with rigorous academic mastery. The focus areas specifically list reading mastery, math mastery, writing, history, civic literacy, and science.
So it's a dual focus.
Right, that's the mechanism here. You cannot change your environment if you cannot read, obviously. But reading alone, without cultural confidence, leaves you vulnerable to assimilation.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Mcwilson explicitly states that the objective of these first 2 phases is to move Black children from survival to mastery.
It's a huge distinction.
Yeah. The expectation isn't just surviving a flawed educational system. It is about completely mastering themselves and mastering their environment.
It's a total shift from playing defense to playing offense. But, having a culturally confident child who possesses reading and math mastery doesn't mean much if the broader system refuses to recognize that mastery.
Or gatekeeps them from advanced opportunities.
Exactly. If phases 1 and 2 are about writing a new, highly effective operating system for students, the next phases are about hacking the external hardware.
The legal, civic, and economic structures.
Right. Adjusting the hardware so that new operating system can actually run.
That is a perfect transition because building internal capacity means nothing without measurable outcomes and, external enforcement. Which brings us to phase 3, Black institutional accountability. And this section of the blueprint is incredibly demanding.
It really is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Mcwilson is making a distinct rhetorical and operational shift here. He isn't just demanding accountability from external, historically white systems.
He's looking inward.
He is demanding rigorous, localized accountability internally from Black institutions as well.
And the mechanism for this is the creation of a public Black education scorecard. But the text says this scorecard isn't just for evaluating local school districts. It is meant to judge NAACP branches, churches, civic groups, fraternities, sororities, and local foundations.
Which is a bold move.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I read this part, I was pretty skeptical. I was like, wait, hold on. A local fraternity chapter or a community church. How do they control what a 4th grader is reading in a public school? That seems like an impossible standard to hold them to.
It does seem like a stretch at first, until you look at the leverage those organizations actually hold. Mcwilson's argument is that these institutions possess immense social capital, physical real estate, and financial resources.
Okay, true.
So the scorecard would measure metrics like reading proficiency, access to advanced placement courses, and parent engagement in their specific zip codes.
Meaning they're judged on the outcomes in their own backyard.
Exactly. If a local church has thousands of members, but the school across the street has a 16% reading proficiency rate, the scorecard forces that church to redirect its resources.
So they can't just be a bystander.
Right. Whether that means hosting tutoring centers or mobilizing voters for school board elections or funding literacy programs, it ensures that leadership is tethered to measurable progress for the youth rather than just, symbolic community presence.
Ah, I see. It is about activating dormant community infrastructure. And from that internal activation, the plan pivots outward in phase 4. This is political and legal power. This phase establishes local civil rights education task forces to aggressively challenge systemic barriers.
And the text provides a very specific list of targets these task forces are designed to confront. According to Mcwilson's blueprint, they must challenge anti-Black curriculum erasure, book bans, anti-DEI laws, discriminatory discipline practices, and the tracking of students with low expectations.
We should look at the actual mechanism here, though, because how does a local task force dismantle something massive like discriminatory funding or curriculum erasure? I mean, it's not just about protesting, right?
No, exactly. The framework outlines a highly systematic process. For example, it lists the use of public records requests.
Like FOIA requests.
Yes. Freedom of Information Act requests. A task force might file these to expose exactly how a school district is allocating its budget, perhaps proving that advanced STEM programs are disproportionately funded in certain neighborhoods.
Okay, so they get the hard data. Then what?
Well, once they have that data, they don't just, present it at a local meeting and complain. They use it as legal ammunition to file Title VI civil rights complaints or initiate actual litigation.
It converts the data into a legal mechanism. The interconnectedness of this is what really stands out to me. You can't just offer testimony about how hard things are. According to this framework, suffering and marginalization must be translated into litigation, into altered budgets, into binding contracts, and into enforced policy.
Which, as you can imagine, naturally requires resources. I mean, you cannot sustain long-term litigation or fund independent academic power centers without capital.
True.
And that feeds directly into Phase 5, economic power.
Yeah, the blueprint insists that educational strategies must physically connect to economic independence. So Phase 5 outlines community economic strategies that directly fund the educational phases. Things like establishing Black-owned tutoring businesses, publishing companies, and parent cooperative schools.
And to understand how this actually functions, look at the mechanisms proposed, like community investment circles.
How do those work?
Well, instead of relying on traditional banking structures, which, going back to Cross's theory of accumulated advantage, may be historically hostile or inaccessible, an investment circle pools small dollar amounts from hundreds of community members.
Oh, like crowdfunding their own institutions.
Exactly. That pooled capital is then used to purchase a building for a Black-owned petering center or to seed a youth entrepreneurship program.
So a parent cooperative school could be entirely funded and governed by the community investment circle, meaning they're bypassing the traditional gatekeepers altogether while simultaneously creating a pipeline for Black teachers and administrators.
Precisely. It creates this closed-loop microeconomy. The knowledge built in Phase 1 creates the academic mastery in Phase 2. That mastery requires the accountability of Phase 3, which is defended by the legal strategies of Phase 4, and ultimately funded by the economic independence of Phase 5.
It is a structural response to a structural problem. I mean, Theodore Cross diagnosed the issue as an entrenched system of accumulated advantage. Jimma Maat Dogon Mcwilson's response is to engineer a counter-system of measurable capacity and organized leverage.
Right, and as this comprehensive document draws to a close, it distills all of these phases and mechanisms into 4 foundational maxims. These statements basically capture the entire evolution of the imperative from 1984 to 2026.
Let's walk through them because they are powerful. First, the text states that equality without power is fragile.
Second, rights without enforcement are just promises.
Oof. Third, education without identity is mere assimilation.
And fourth, representation without accountability is just symbolism.
So, what does this all mean for the ultimate objective? The text clearly states that for 2026 and beyond, the goal is Black children reading, thinking, building, owning, governing, and knowing exactly who they are. It takes the highly abstract concept of societal equality and demands that it be made concrete, measurable, and self-sustaining.
It is an incredibly rigorous architectural framework. And, as we wrap up our analysis of this blueprint, this raises an important question for you to consider, regardless of your background.
Yeah, we always like to leave you with something to chew on.
Exactly. If true power requires defining yourself and enforcing your own internal accountability, in what areas of your own life or your own community are you relying on symbolic representation rather than building independent capacity?
That's a great question.
And how might the systems you participate in every day be quietly accumulating advantage or disadvantage, round after round?
That is a phenomenal thought to leave off on. A huge thank you to you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. We started by asking how to fix the broken mechanics of inequality, and we explored a document that offers a highly specific, phase-by-phase framework for doing exactly that. Thank you for exploring the mechanics with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.